Hello, ladies and gentlemen. So, this is about Oregon being the first state with statewide rent control. It is set to become, and it is. And so, this is really, really good right here. Hopefully, other places that have issues with rent control, not having any rent control, will start to look at this as a great example. So, disregard all of the movement and everything from this video. I think it is unrelated to the article. So this article is about Oregon is set to become the first state with statewide rent control. The bill expected to be signed into law this week would limit rent increases and require reasons for some evictions. And so this, I think, is a win-win. Oregon may soon be the first state to impose mandatory rent control. Senate Bill 608, which would limit annual rent increases and strengthen tenants' rights, was approved Tuesday by the state's House on 35 to 25 vote. It had already passed the state Senate on February 11th. Governor Kate Brown, who has expressed support for the bill, is expected to sign it into law on Thursday. Her office told this to the Huffington Post, and many other articles have this now. So, as well as capping rent increases at a yearly 7% plus inflation, the legislation would prevent landlords from evicting tenants without a reason after the first year of tenancy. That is really, really good. Okay. And so we need this in California. We really do. Because there's a huge issue with homelessness because of these issues. So there are exemptions to the rent increase cap, including cases where the rent is subsidized or when tenants leave the residency of their own violation. For month-to-month tenants, the landlord would also have to give 90 days written notice before raising their rents. So this new legislation is one of the many actions Oregon needs to take to address our housing crisis, Governor Brown has said in a statement following the House vote. While it provides some immediate relief, we need to focus on building supply in order to address Oregon's housing challenges for the long term. So it also is extremely important to educate tenants and landlords as well and help them navigate the tight rental market as the new law is implemented. So rising rents are an issue in Oregon, and not only in Oregon, in major cities across the country. So median rents in Salem, Eugene, and Bend, three of Oregon's largest cities, have increased by a quarter over the last 4 years, according to Willamette Week. So in Portland, Oregon, the state's biggest city, median rents have jumped at 30% since 2011. So the New York Times reported this. So State Representative Jack Zika expressed concern about the bill passage, tweeting on Tuesday that it could reduce the quantity and quality of housing available. House Speaker Tina Kotek, in contrast, applauded the bill's passage, calling it a groundbreaking tenant protection bill that will make a real difference for Oregon renters. Wow. We hope that that will move to other cities, major cities, and one being in California, Los Angeles, Pasadena, and all the neighboring cities as well that follow in on there, and like Compton, Watts, all of those places, Boyle Heights, Hollywood, Ladera Heights, all the places that are like neighboring Culver City, which has always been very high. So Oregon is already making that bill known that they have passed it. Okay. And so I'm trying to go back into here. Okay, so rent control passage galvanizes activists across the U.S. So this is so groundbreaking, you guys, that other people who are activists on rent control have saw this and they are overjoyed that somebody is looking into this and they are trying to make changes. This is how you make change. Oregon's rent control passage galvanizes activists across the U.S. And so here you have it right here. Members and supporters of Portland's tenant united protest outside of Oregon State Capitol in Salem in 2017 in support of lifting a statewide ban on rent control. The bill failed, but the legislature on Tuesday passed a statewide rent control bill. So, so So then it goes on to say that Oregon's passage of the statewide rent control policy, the first of its kind, notched a majority victory for groups across the country that are pushing for similar changes in their cities and states. So Senate Bill 608, the biggest rent control expansion in decades, won final legislative approval on Tuesday. So, and is expected to be signed into law Thursday. So this basically is reiterating what I have already said, but this is really good. So here's the thing here. The left landlord groups wary, okay? So let's look at this. The prospect of a shift away from rent control bans in most states has invigorated tenant activists and left landlord groups wary. So they kind of were profiting off of this. You know, some of these, landlord or, let's say owners and these developers and all that, they were profiting off of these high rents. So a coalition of tenant organizations said on Wednesday that the campaigns to enact and expand rent control policies are underway as we speak. So in at least 5 other states, California, Colorado, Illinois, New York, Washington, as well as the cities in Philadelphia, Providence, and Rhode Island are on the bandwagon, y'all. So they want to do something with this rent, this high rent. So it's a phenomenal at what's happening in Oregon. So this is Jawanza Malone, an organizer from the Lift the Ban Coalition in Illinois, which seeks to repeal the state's prohibition on local rent control policy. So we're looking forward to having a similar celebration in Illinois very, very soon. So this is a good thing. This is what people need. This can help with some of these people that we see that are homeless. Families are being displaced. So Oregon's legislature passes the nation's first statewide rent control. When one starts doing it, the others catch on. So the Tenants Union of Washington State is supporting the bills to end the evictions without a cause, giving tenants more time to catch up on back rent and allow judges more discretion in eviction cases. But with the deadline passed to introduce new bills in the state's legislative session, any chance at the 3% cap on rent increase the group is seeking appears done until next year. So activists there, however, are drawing encouragement from across Columbia River. So there hasn't been a win for rent control on a scale in a long time. And it's really exciting. And it happens so close, said Diana Brasio. Okay, so an education coordinator with Tenants Union. So we're hoping that this will enable us to have a conversation we need to have around rent control and what we need it to look like in Washington State. And so rent controls adopted in the U.S. during World War II and a resurgence in 1960s through the 1970s largely fell out of favor by the end of the 1980s. So many states, including Oregon, prohibited rent control at the state level. So with economists largely sharing the consensus that they result in less rental housing and higher rents in the long run. So decades of relative quiet or of relative quiet on the topic followed. So what's changed? An acute national shortage of rental housing in recent years, driven by a steep decline in construction during the Great Recession that hasn't fully bounced back, sent rent skyrocketing. So the problem was all the worse in areas with strong population growth, including most major cities in the West. So in Metro Portland, the average rent For the typical two-bedroom apartment has climbed to 60% since 2010. Some households saw much bigger increases. So apartment buildings sold to new owners who planned renovations saw rents double and or more. It's like a perfect storm, said Doug Bibby. So the president, he's the president of the National Multifamily Housing Council. And so a landlord group that opposes rent control, and this came on almost like a tsunami. But Bibi said that rent control fails to solve the root issues, slow income growth, and the lagging supply of rental homes. Lawmakers, he said, need to instead look at policies that help expand the housing supply, including faster building permit approvals and more lenient land use policies and more subsidies for low income households to pay for housing. So, rent control, he said, is taking a blunt instrument when you need a scalpel to deal with a very nuanced market driven problem. So, Oregon lawmakers banned rent control in 1982 to stem a series of local rent control campaigns. In 2017, the bill to lift that prohibition passed in the House before stalling in the Senate. So this time, Oregon lawmakers sought to address the most eye popping rent hikes by capping rent increases at 7% plus inflation annually and forbidding evictions without a stated cause. They did cap increases after this tenant leaves in most cases, nor did they allow to implement their own rent control policies, and they exempted newly constructed buildings for 15 years in an effort to keep new construction going. Oregon tenant organizers say that the bill's a leap forward, but the high cap on rent increases and various exemptions baked into the bill have left some on alert, and we wish it wouldn't have gone much further than it did. This was said by Trina Holland, the executive of the Oregon's Community Alliance of Tenants, and you'd better believe we'll be back. So this is an issue that's hotly debated, and a lot of people are happy about the rent control bill passing because they feel that other states will catch hold. And I read those to you, didn't I? Right here, that they said other states, at least 5 other states, California being one for sure, Colorado, Illinois, New York, and Washington, as well as cities like Philadelphia and Providence and Rhode Island. And so there are some people that are for the rent control and others who are opposed to it. And you know why, of course. They've stated their claim. They feel that it's just not really going to resolve all of the issues with the housing market. So, what are your thoughts on that issue? Because this is a win win, I believe, in some ways. But then some people say, no, it's not really getting to the very core of our issues. But we got to start somewhere. So, thoughts, feedback, comment on this situation. This is a big deal that Oregon is really making a move on this, and they're the first state on the map to do something about this, and it's making activists speak out on the issue of the housing crisis. Thanks for listening.